The official story of the Roswell incident represents one of the most calculated deceptions in modern history. This wasn't merely a misidentification or simple military cover-up of classified technology. What unfolded in the summer of 1947 was a deliberate campaign to bury a truth so profound that those in power determined humanity wasn't prepared to confront it. Every detail you've been told about weather balloons and atmospheric phenomena serves as carefully constructed misdirection, designed to shield you from the impossible reality of what crashed in the New Mexico desert. On July 2, 1947, the evening sky above New Mexico erupted in unprecedented meteorological violence. Rancher William Brazel witnessed a thunderstorm of biblical proportions unleash torrents of rain and lightning across the desolate landscape. For a man whose life revolved around the predictable cycles of ranch work, this storm initially seemed like another harsh but familiar challenge. His sheep huddled together against the elements while he waited indoors, listening to thunder that shook the foundations of his modest dwelling. Yet something fundamentally different accompanied this particular storm. Between the natural thunder came another sound, a concussive blast that felt alien to the desert environment. This explosion didn't follow the rhythmic patterns of atmospheric disturbance. Instead, it tore through the fabric of the storm itself, creating a sonic signature that would haunt Brazel's memory for years to come. The very air seemed to vibrate with frequencies that defied natural explanation. The following morning revealed devastation that challenged everything Brazel understood about his familiar landscape. While checking on his livestock, he discovered debris scattered across an enormous area spanning hundreds of yards. This wasn't the recognizable wreckage of conventional aircraft or the flimsy remnants of military weather equipment. The field contained metallic fragments unlike anything produced by human technology. Individual pieces of this material displayed properties that violated basic physics. Brazel retrieved a section resembling aluminum foil, yet it possessed impossible characteristics. Despite its thinness, the material resisted all attempts at permanent deformation. When crumpled into tight balls, it would slowly unfold itself, returning to perfect flatness without retaining any creases or fold marks. The substance seemed to possess memory at a molecular level. Other fragments appeared wooden in texture while maintaining the lightness of balsa, yet they demonstrated structural integrity that surpassed steel. These beam-like pieces bore intricate symbols etched along their surfaces, hieroglyphic markings that resembled no known written language. The characters pulsed with faint luminescence in shades of purple and pink, as if powered by an internal energy source that remained active despite the apparent crash. Uncertain about the nature of his discovery and isolated by the considerable distance to town, Brazel collected the most unusual specimens and waited several days before making the journey to Roswell. On July 6, he finally drove into town and presented his findings to Sheriff George Wilcox. The sheriff examined the debris with growing amazement, recognizing immediately that these materials fell far outside his area of expertise or experience. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Sheriff Wilcox contacted Roswell Army Airfield, home to the 509th Bomb Group, the elite military unit responsible for deploying atomic weapons against Japan just 2 years earlier. This wasn't some remote outpost staffed by inexperienced personnel. The base represented one of the most technologically advanced and secure military installations on Earth, staffed by the most qualified personnel available to the United States military. Base Commander Colonel William Blanchard dispatched Major Jesse Marcel, the installation's chief intelligence officer, to investigate the claims. Marcel possessed extensive military experience and held one of the highest security clearances in the American Armed Forces. His training specifically prepared him to identify conventional and experimental military technology. When Marcel reached the crash site with Brazel, what he witnessed fundamentally challenged his understanding of materials science and aeronautical engineering. The debris field stretched far beyond Brazel's initial description. Marcel spent hours methodically collecting samples, his expert eye telling him that these materials originated from no terrestrial source. The metallic fragments demonstrated properties that exceeded anything in the classified military inventory. The strange symbols appeared to follow logical patterns suggesting an advanced written language, yet they corresponded to no alphabet or symbolic system in military intelligence files. Marcel became convinced he was examining wreckage from an extraterrestrial craft. His years of training in materials identification and aircraft recognition provided him with the expertise to distinguish between experimental military technology and something that transcended human engineering capabilities. The implications of this discovery weighed heavily on his mind during the drive back to base. Acting on Maas's assessment, the military moved swiftly to secure the site and manage the situation. On July 8, 1947, Base Public Information Officer Walter Oates issued a press release under direct orders from Colonel Blanchard. The statement was unambiguous and electrifying, officially announcing that the Army had recovered a flying disc from a ranch near Roswell. This wasn't speculation or preliminary assessment, it was an official military declaration. The news exploded across global media networks. The Roswell Daily Record published a banner headline proclaiming RAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. For several stunning hours, the world believed it had witnessed confirmation that humanity was not alone in the universe. Radio broadcasts carried the story internationally while newspapers prepared special editions to cover this unprecedented announcement. Then, with calculated precision, the military completely reversed its position. Less than 24 hours after the initial announcement, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, convened an emergency press conference. He presented entirely different debris to assembled reporters: flimsy aluminum foil, splintered wooden sticks, and torn rubber fragments from what he claimed was a conventional weather balloon. General Ramey announced that the entire incident resulted from misidentification by inexperienced personnel. Major Marcel was ordered to pose for photographs with this substitute debris, his face displaying obvious discomfort and confusion as he held up pathetic scraps that bore no resemblance to the impossible materials he had personally collected just hours earlier. The official narrative was sealed: a weather balloon, mistaken identity, nothing more to investigate. The American public, conditioned to trust military authority in the post-war era, largely accepted this explanation despite its glaring inconsistencies. However, for the personnel who had direct contact with the actual debris, the deception was just beginning. The real materials had been secretly transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for analysis by the military's most advanced research teams. While headlines moved on to other stories, whispers throughout Roswell only intensified. Military personnel who had handled the genuine debris knew the weather balloon explanation was fabricated. They spoke in hushed conversations about metallic foil that couldn't be burnt, cut, or permanently dented. They described the strange, luminescent symbols that seemed to glow with internal energy and the lightweight beam materials that demonstrated impossible structural integrity. Glenn Dennis, a young mortician working at Ballard Funeral Home, received a series of disturbing telephone calls from the mortuary officer at Roswell Army Airfield in the days following the crash. The officer made unusual inquiries about the availability of small, hermetically sealed caskets, specifically child-sized containers. His questions became increasingly specific and urgent, focusing on methods for preserving bodies that had been exposed to environmental elements for extended periods. The mortuary officer expressed particular concern about chemical changes in tissue and potential contamination issues. These weren't routine inquiries about standard military casualties. Dennis recognized the unusual nature of these requests but couldn't understand their context until years later, when a nurse from the base, a close personal friend, confided in him about what she had witnessed in a state of visible terror. The nurse described seeing recovered bodies from the crash site that were distinctly non-human in appearance. She reported that these beings were small in stature with disproportionately large heads and frail limb structures. Before she could provide more details, she was abruptly transferred to England and never returned to the United States. Her hasty departure, combined with the unusual mortuary inquiries, painted a picture of recovery operations that extended far beyond weather balloon debris. For decades, these accounts remained buried beneath official denials and public skepticism. The Roswell incident faded from national consciousness exactly as military planners intended. Cold War tensions, the space race, and other geopolitical crises dominated public attention while the truth about that summer night in New Mexico was systematically suppressed and ridiculed. The breakthrough came through the persistent work of nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, whose scientific background and methodical approach gave him credibility that UFO enthusiasts often lacked. Rather than accepting stories at face value, Friedman conducted rigorous investigation using scientific methodology. His greatest achievement was locating and interviewing Major Jesse Marcel, who had retired from active duty but remained bound by military oath for 30 years. When Marcel finally spoke publicly, his testimony was explosive. He confirmed that the materials shown in the famous photographs with General Ramy were complete fabrications, pathetic substitutes that bore no resemblance to the actual debris he had collected. Marcel described the genuine materials with the same sense of awe he had experienced in 1947, the memory metal that would unfold itself perfectly, the ultra-lightweight beam stronger than any known alloy, and the mysterious symbols that seemed to contain meaning beyond human comprehension. Marcel's testimony, coming from the intelligence officer who had been the first military professional to examine the wreckage, demolished the foundation of the official weather balloon story. Here was a decorated military officer with impeccable credentials and the highest security clearances, confirming that the government had perpetrated a deliberate deception for 3 decades. Friedman's investigation revealed additional inconsistencies that further undermined official explanations. Why would Roswell Army Airfield, home to the world's only atomic bomb squadron and staffed by the most experienced military personnel available, issue a press release about a flying disc if they had merely recovered a weather balloon? The 509th Bomb Group had extensive experience with all types of military aircraft and experimental technology. Moreover, crucial military records from July 1947 had mysteriously vanished from base archives. Outgoing and incoming message logs, radio communications, and daily activity reports for those specific dates were missing, as if someone had surgically removed evidence of those critical days from historical record. This systematic elimination of documentation suggested coordinated effort to hide the truth rather than simple bureaucratic oversight. Under mounting pressure from researchers and public inquiries, the United States Air Force was finally forced to address the Roswell question again. In 1994, they released a comprehensive report acknowledging that the weather balloon story had been a cover for a classified military program. The wreckage, they now claimed, came from Project Mogul, a top-secret operation using high-altitude balloon trains equipped with acoustic sensors to detect sound waves from Soviet nuclear tests. This explanation seemed plausible and satisfied many skeptics. It accounted for the military secrecy, unusual materials, and frantic recovery efforts. The Air Force appeared to have finally provided a rational explanation that closed the Roswell case definitively. However, this new official story failed to address the most disturbing aspect of witness testimony, the reported recovery of non-human bodies. 3 years later, in 1997, the Air Force released their final report titled The Roswell Report, Case Closed. This document attempted to explain away witness accounts of alien corpses by claiming that people had misremembered events and conflated the 1947 balloon crash with unrelated military accidents. The alien bodies, according to this report, were anthropomorphic test dummies dropped from high altitudes during parachute experiments conducted in the 1950s. This explanation insulted the intelligence of witnesses and the general public. The Air Force was asking people to believe that credible witnesses had confused events separated by nearly a decade, misremembering test dummies as alien corpses. The explanation felt less like genuine disclosure and more like another layer of deception designed to silence persistent questions. The truth about Roswell refuses to remain buried, particularly as similar incidents continue to surface with increasing frequency. 5 years after the New Mexico crash, in July 1952, the cover-up faced its most significant public challenge when extraordinary events unfolded directly over Washington, D.C. This wasn't some remote desert encounter that could be easily dismissed. This was a direct confrontation with unknown aerial phenomena in the heart of American political power. Over 2 consecutive weekends, commercial airline pilots and air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport reported brilliant, fast-moving lights performing maneuvers that defied known physics. These weren't fleeting glimpses or ambiguous observations. The objects demonstrated controlled flight patterns, executing sharp angular turns and instantaneous acceleration that would destroy any conventional aircraft. They moved in organized formations, suggesting intelligence and purpose behind their movements. Airport radar operators confirmed visual sightings with solid technical data. Unidentified targets appeared on their screens, their movements perfectly matching what pilots reported in the sky. The correlation between visual and electronic observation eliminated the possibility of technical malfunction or misidentification. Whatever was flying over the nation's capital was real, substantial, and completely beyond conventional explanation. The sightings generated such widespread concern that F-94 Starfire interceptors were scrambled from nearby Newcastle Air Force Base. Their engines screamed into the night sky over a terrified city as military pilots attempted to engage the unknown objects. Yet each time the jets approached, the mysterious lights would either vanish instantaneously or effortlessly outmaneuver the advanced military aircraft before reappearing in different locations moments later. When the Air Force finally offered an official explanation, they claimed the entire incident resulted from a temperature inversion, a rare atmospheric phenomenon where layers of warm air trap cooler air below, potentially creating false radar signals and optical illusions. However, atmospheric physicist Dr. James McDonald conducted detailed analysis of the radar data and witness testimonies, concluding that while temperature inversions could cause some anomalies, they couldn't account for the controlled, intelligent flight patterns observed over Washington. McDonald pointed out the statistical impossibility of such massive and distinct atmospheric events occurring twice on separate weekends in exactly the same manner. Temperature inversions don't create objects that respond to approaching aircraft by changing course or disappearing altogether. The Washington incidents became classified as unexplained phenomena in Project Blue Book files, despite official claims of atmospheric explanation. The global nature of these encounters becomes apparent when examining the December 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident near RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters in Suffolk, England. These NATO installations were hosting United States Air Force operations when military security personnel witnessed strange lights descending into the nearby forest. The initial assumption was a crashed aircraft, triggering standard search and rescue protocols. Sergeant Jim Peniston led a patrol into the woods, accompanied by Airman First Class John Burroughs and other servicemen. As they moved deeper into the forest, following the strange illumination, they encountered something that challenged their understanding of reality. In a small clearing sat an object that clearly didn't belong, a triangular craft approximately 9 feet wide and 6 feet high that appeared to be deliberately positioned rather than crashed. Peniston described the object's surface as seamless dark metallic material that absorbed light from their flashlights without reflection. Intricate symbols covered its exterior, glyphs that resembled hieroglyphics but belonged to no earthly culture. With remarkable presence of mind, Peniston sketched these symbols in his service notebook, creating documentation that would later become crucial evidence. The craft emitted a low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate through their bodies while producing brilliant light that somehow wasn't blinding. When Peniston touched the surface, he felt warmth and subtle vibration, as if the object contained active power systems. The moment his fingers made contact, the symbols began glowing with intense blue light. Seconds later, the craft lifted silently from the forest floor and vanished in an instantaneous burst of impossible speed. The following morning, investigators returned to secure the site and document physical evidence. They discovered 3 distinct depressions in the hard ground forming a perfect equilateral triangle, indentations that appeared to have been created by heavy, stable landing gear. Trees surrounding the landing site showed clear signs of heat damage, with scorched bark and damaged pine needles on branches facing the clearing. Radiation measurements using military detection equipment confirmed elevated levels within the triangular landing area and on damaged trees. The readings were significantly higher than normal background radiation, providing objective scientific evidence that something powerful and unusual had been present at the location. 2 nights later, the phenomenon returned. Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt assembled his own investigation team, bringing a portable cassette recorder to document their findings. The resulting Holt tape provides real-time audio evidence of military officers witnessing multiple glowing objects performing impossible aerial maneuvers. On the recording, you can hear Holt's professional military composure gradually dissolve into amazement and confusion as he describes objects splitting apart, reforming, and moving at incredible speeds. At one point, he reports a beam of light shooting down from one of the objects directly into the weapons storage area, the most sensitive location on the entire base. The Rendlesham Forest incident provides the most comprehensive documentation of military personnel experiencing close encounters with unexplained phenomena. These weren't civilian observers prone to misidentification, they were trained NATO servicemen at a nuclear-capable installation, equipped with measurement devices and recording equipment. Their testimony, backed by physical trace evidence and real-time audio documentation, represents some of the most credible UFO evidence ever collected. The pattern extends beyond terrestrial airspace to maritime encounters that demonstrate global scope of this phenomenon. On October 4, 1967, residents of Shag Harbor, a small fishing village in Nova Scotia, Canada, witnessed a large object with yellowish lights crash into the harbor. Multiple independent observers, from teenagers to experienced fishermen, reported the same event, an estimated 60-foot diameter craft tilting at a 45-degree angle before plunging into the dark waters. The impact created a brilliant flash followed by a pale yellowish light that floated on the surface approximately half a mile from shore. This light was accompanied by thick, sulfur-scented foam that bubbled around the impact site. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police responded immediately, assuming they were dealing with a conventional aircraft accident. When officers arrived, they found the strange light drifting with the tide but discovered none of the debris typically associated with plane crashes. A full-scale search and rescue operation was launched, involving Coast Guard cutters, local fishing boats, and eventually Royal Canadian Navy divers who conducted extensive underwater searches of the impact area. The official search continued for several days but turned up absolutely no wreckage, oil slick, or fragment of conventional aircraft. The object that dozens of credible witnesses saw plunge into the harbor had simply vanished. What makes the Shag Harbor case particularly compelling is the extensive paper trail. Declassified documents from the Canadian Department of National Defence confirm the entire incident and officially classify it as an unidentified flying object encounter. Perhaps the most technologically interactive UFO event occurred on September 2019, 1976, in the skies over Tehran, Iran. The incident began with a flood of calls to air traffic control from civilians reporting a brilliant star-like object darting across the northern sky with impossible speed and agility. The reports were so numerous and consistent that the Iranian Air Force scrambled an F-4 Phantom II jet fighter to investigate. As the pilot approached within 25 nautical miles of the object, his aircraft's instrumentation and communications system suffered complete failure. Radio communications filled with static, navigation equipment malfunctioned, and cockpit systems flickered unpredictably. Faced with total electronic failure of his advanced fighter jet, the pilot aborted the intercept and returned to base. Remarkably, the moment he turned away, all systems immediately returned to normal function. A second F-4 Phantom, piloted by Major Parvez Jafari, was dispatched to continue the investigation. As Jafari closed distance with the target, he could see it clearly, a dazzling diamond-shaped craft flashing with intense red, green, orange, and blue lights. His radar locked onto the object, confirming its physical presence and substantial size. The situation escalated dramatically when a smaller object detached from the main craft and streaked directly toward Jafari's fighter on an apparent attack vector. Following standard military protocol, Jafari attempted to arm and fire an IEM-9 Sidewinder missile. However, the moment he selected weapons, his entire fire control system went dead. The launch mechanism became completely unresponsive while his communications failed simultaneously. Jafari threw his aircraft into evasive maneuvers as the smaller object approached. Rather than pursuing the attack, the projectile gracefully curved away, returned to the parent craft, and merged seamlessly back into ET. The instant this reunion occurred, all of Jafari's systems blinked back to life as if nothing had happened. The primary object then descended toward the desert and appeared to land, casting a massive pool of luminous light across the landscape. Ground teams dispatched to investigate the landing site the following day found no physical traces, though they detected lingering pockets of elevated radiation in the area where the object had touched down. The Tehran incident represents a direct technological confrontation between advanced military aircraft and an unknown intelligence that demonstrated complete mastery over electronic systems. A decorated fighter pilot in one of the world's most sophisticated warplanes had been systematically neutralized and released by forces that remain unexplained nearly half a century later. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency took the Tehran encounter seriously enough to produce classified reports that were later declassified under Freedom of Information Act requests. These documents confirm the extraordinary nature of the events and validate the pilots' testimonies. The DIA analysis concluded that the Iranian crews had encountered genuine unknown phenomena demonstrating capabilities far beyond any terrestrial technology. These modern encounters connect to historical patterns that extend back centuries, suggesting this phenomenon has accompanied human civilization throughout its development. The April 2014, 1561 celestial battle over Nuremberg, Germany, represents one of the most well-documented historical UFO events. Hundreds of citizens witnessed an aerial confrontation involving objects of various shapes, spheres, cylinders, crosses, and discs, engaging in what appeared to be organized combat. According to contemporary broadsheet accounts, these objects performed rapid maneuvers and collided with one another in mid-air, producing flashes of light and sparks that rained down from the sky. After these aerial conflicts, some objects appeared to crash outside the city trailing smoke, though no wreckage was ever recovered. Other objects simply vanished at incredible speeds, leaving behind a single massive black spear-like object that hung motionless in the sky before it too disappeared. While modern skeptics suggest the Nuremberg event might have been atmospheric phenomena like sun dogs or halos, these explanations fail to account for the complex interactive behaviors described by numerous witnesses. Optical illusions don't engage in aerial combat, collide, or fall from the sky trailing smoke. The patterns described match those reported in modern UFO encounters, suggesting continuity of phenomena across centuries. Even earlier historical accounts, such as the strange light witnessed before the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, indicate this phenomenon has influenced human events throughout recorded history. The historian Plutarch described a bright, torch-like object that moved slowly across the night sky as Julius Caesar and Pompey prepared for their decisive battle. Both armies interpreted the sighting according to their own perspectives. Caesar's troops saw it as divine approval while Pompey's forces viewed it as an omen of doom. The convergence of historical accounts, military encounters, physical evidence, and witness testimonies creates a comprehensive picture that transcends simple explanation or dismissal. From ancient Rome to modern Iran, from medieval Germany to contemporary England, the pattern remains consistent: unexplained aerial phenomena demonstrating advanced technology and apparent intelligence. The implications of accepting this evidence as genuine are staggering. If these encounters represent contact with non-human intelligence, then every assumption about humanity's place in the universe requires fundamental reassessment. The technology demonstrated in these incidents, anti-gravity propulsion, instantaneous acceleration, electromagnetic interference capabilities, and apparent faster-than-light travel, suggests scientific knowledge that surpasses human understanding by centuries or millennia. The systematic suppression and ridicule of this evidence makes perfect sense from a governmental perspective. Disclosure of extraterrestrial contact would undermine existing power structures, religious beliefs, and social order in ways that could prove catastrophic. The carefully maintained fiction of human uniqueness and technological supremacy serves to preserve stability and control. Yet the evidence continues to accumulate despite official denial and public skepticism. Military personnel continue to come forward with testimonies that corroborate the reality of unexplained phenomena. Physical trace evidence, radar data, and photographic documentation provide objective support for subjective witness accounts. The truth about Roswell was never really about a single incident in the New Mexico desert. It was the beginning of a global cover-up designed to prevent humanity from confronting the reality that we are not alone, that we are not the most advanced intelligence in the universe, and that our understanding of physics, technology, and cosmic reality is fundamentally limited. The deception continues because those in power believe we are not ready for the truth. They may be correct. The revelation that extraterrestrial intelligences have been studying humanity for decades or centuries would transform every aspect of human society, from religion and philosophy to science and politics. But the evidence speaks for itself. The witnesses continue to testify. The documents continue to surface. And somewhere, in classified facilities around the world, the physical proof of humanity's cosmic visitors continues to exist, waiting for the day when we are deemed ready to join the larger galactic community. Until that day arrives, the official story remains: weather balloons, atmospheric anomalies, and mistaken identity. The truth, however, lies buried beneath layers of secrecy, ridicule, and denial, waiting to be revealed to a species finally prepared to accept its place in a universe far more complex and populated than we have been allowed to imagine.